when we asked everyone to fill the form, we saw that 85 to 90% of people were still in beginner level. And I thought it very important, even though the depth of the presentation is going to be quite engaging for those not in beginner level. But I decided to dumb it down a little bit. So if you're someone advanced in your journey of grant writing, this would feel like a refresher, but there are also some insights that could, help you on your journey. But if you're someone that you just have an idea, you're trying to move from point A to point B, or you've maybe done one or two applications in the past that weren't to success, and now you're trying to level up your journey, then this is something that will be very, very important to you to help you move from that starting point to the confidence to even attempt an application, right? So really happy and really excited for Hyperspace to give us this platform to speak. Some of my team are here, and I'm sure these are things they might have already known, but they're still here to learn a bit more. Just a bit about the person speaking to you. My name is Chuma. I'm Nigerian, but currently based in Switzerland, and I'm the founder of Applai. So we started Applai first as a consulting firm helping founders raise grants. And some of our writers have raised more than $1 million in funding for founders in Africa and Europe. And we started Applai as a way to provide African founders the platform to do it themselves, right? To streamline the process that they've of grant seeking. And a lot of founders, which I'll share as we go on this presentation, they spend so much time researching opportunities, trying to write applications, trying to manage everything. And this is a very recurring process that we see more founders spend time looking for grants or looking for funding than actually doing their business, because you need the funding to grow your business. So we decided to build a platform powered by AI to help founders approach that journey. Before now, I've spent the last couple of years as a social entrepreneur, building solutions in Nigeria to help the communities in Nigeria and try to make a change either socially or environmentally. Some of these projects I've run, I've secured lots of grants for them from funders like GIZ, ACT Foundation, Antonio Elumelu Foundation, and a lot of funders. I've also had the opportunity to speak in Qatar, South Korea, Germany, and share my story from some of the projects I've done. And I'm also here in Switzerland trying to get applied into the European markets as well. Before that, I'm not just a grant writer, but also an investment analyst working at TVC Labs. They're an accelerator in Lagos, Nigeria, led by an angel investor, Tommy Davis. And I've helped find founders for equity investments. We've invested more than 50 million naira in startups that are, making change in Africa, not just Nigeria, but also in Africa. So speaking to you now, I'm bringing experience in grant writing, but also experience in equity investing. So if you have any questions, not too many questions in equity investing, but mostly grant writing. But if you have any questions generally in being investment ready and applying for grants and everything that you need, then I'm someone that could be of help, or connect to someone that would be of help. So to go into the main agenda for today, we would be covering 8 core points. And as I said, we're going to be dumbing it down a little bit. So we'll start from what a grant is. For those that maybe this may be the first time you're hearing the word grant, or you just need a refresher, we'll also be talking about certain myths. There are a lot of founders that approach me and say, oh, grants, I feel it's for this, but actually it's for that. And, so we'll be clarifying certain things. So you take out some of the misconceptions that you have around grants. Then the core of our discussion today would be on the grants life cycle. There are 6 phases that every founder must master, and you must understand that if you're approaching grants, you're going through a cycle. And if you're aware that you are in a cycle, it makes things a lot easier for you to go. Then we'll be going down into the cycle. I think you've already seen it on the agenda: research and discovery, where and how to find opportunities, fit check and readiness. What is the first thing you should do before you even start researching, right? We'll talk about relationship building, because most opportunities that may not be open, the funders are actually scouting, right? You see a lot of people have invite-only opportunities, or maybe they accept unsolicited proposals. So how do you build relationships so that even when the funder is not actively, or doesn't have an open call for application, you can still be in the know and you can still benefit from the funds that are present with the funders? I'm just going to let some people in. And then the actual thing that a lot of people said they want to talk about is writing. So I think I have like 2 slides on writing that would go deep on some things you should consider when you're writing that grant application. And then looking into the future, when you eventually win the grant, which I hope you will, and hopefully after this presentation we'll have like lots of successes. What do you do after you've won a grant, right? What does the funder expect of you after you've won the grants? And then finally, we'll share a bit more about Applai and how we can help you in your journey. There'll be Q&As, and there'll be a feedback form at the end that you have to fill to, share your insights and just help not just us, but also the Hyperspace team to improve on future sessions for you. So that's everything for today. In 1 hour, we're going to push everything and try to see how far we can go. Hopefully, it's very beneficial for you. And yeah, so let's dive in. So the first is, what is a grant? And if I can just get thumbs up, who wants the grants, right? I mean, you're all here to get a grant, but if you can just do some thumbs up to show that you want a grant, just say yes, you want a grant. And sometimes speaking into the existence really helps, right? So what is a grant? A grant is free money, in quote, given for a specific purpose, usually to solve a problem, or usually to empower someone to solve a problem. Usually, there is no repayment, there's no equity dilution, you're not giving out a portion of your company, you're not bringing anybody into your board, you're not diluting your existing shares if you have the limited liability structure, private limited liability structure. So, but I said it's free money because, in quotes, because yes, you're not paying back, yes, you're not giving out anything, but you should understand that for every grant application that you approach, there's an input, there's something you're giving to the application. And first is your time, because it's very time consuming. And second is, sometimes you have to change your story. Most people that are active grants applicants, you would see that for every grant, their story changes. And when you get lost in the journey, sometimes you have to take a step back and say, okay, what are we actually doing? And what is my idea? And what path am I on? Because for every grant, you're changing your story. For every grant you get into, they're getting mentors that are framing your story. So you're giving out something, but not as other funding instruments where you give out time and where you give out your shares or all of that. But again, it's a contract that you need to understand, right? They expect something of you. If they're giving you money, they expect that you should use that money for social good. They expect that you should use that money for environmental good and for what you've said you would use it for, right? We've seen a lot of cases where funders come in, they give money to certain bad actors, and they don't use the money for what it was meant for, and it's very bad for our ecosystem. A lot of funds that had to take back their funding just because the people they gave money to is not didn't use the money for what they wanted to, right? So grants can come from different sources: governments, foundations, corporates, bilateral agencies, multinationals, different people. And you need to understand that the structure of your venture sometimes determines the type of funder or the type of donor you're looking to get grants for. For instance, we've seen a lot of corporates invest in startups or fund startups, right? So like a bank could be giving grants to fintech solutions or compliance solutions. We've seen government agencies give grants to certain type of organizations. So one thing to also understand is how different donors fund different organizations, right? So if you're, I think from some of the examples I got here, for instance, I saw someone that's making cakes, like really nice cakes. So I'll put that as an SME. The type of funder that would typically fund solutions like this there are some private funders that they're especially looking to support women who are building SMEs, and they're very vocal about that. So they're looking for general type of organization. As far as your for-profits, you're generating revenue, you have your product and all of that, right? The same in the same type of example, we also have government donors, right? Government especially funds SMEs. In Nigeria, we have some academic institutions who fund SMEs, right? For instance, the Pan-Atlantic University in Lagos, they have like an SME unit, enterprise development units that support SMEs. So non-profits, foundations are the big names for them. So different funders fund different type of organizations. That's something you should understand before you even approach. Right. So the second thing I want to also share on this topic are certain myths, as I mentioned. The first one is people say grants are only for nonprofits, and that's totally false because for-profit startups and SMEs with clear impacts actually secure grants. There are lots of grants that are coming up for-profit organizations. Sometimes even some foundations are specifying that, okay, social enterprises, right? So you have you have impact focus, but you're generating some form of revenue, right? So again, for-profit organizations don't say grants aren't for you. Grants are especially for you. Sometimes there are grants that are even for you if you have an idea, right? So if you just have an idea, you haven't built your MVP, you haven't established your product, you don't have a team, there are some grants that can help you move from zero to markets. So the second thing that people say is the highest need get the most funding, right? So in your application, you now try to stress that if we don't get this money, we'll go bankrupt, our business will die. We need this money to go from to extend our runway by 3 months. We need this money. Most times it's not about that, right? I've seen people that already have the money, already comfortable, but they still get the grants. And then people say, okay, it's favoritism, or why are these people getting the money because they already have money? But the truth is, it's based on alignment to the funder's goals, right? The funder, every grant has laid out set of instructions, and those who meet those instructions, those who meet the funder's mission, those who align through your writing, through your organization, through your stage, are those that get the money. But it's also about the need, right, of your solution to the people you're trying to solve. The biggest things that grants supports is the need, right? So it's very important that if you have an application, you're able to stress the need of the people, right? For some reasons, my slides keep cutting, but I'm gonna try to present again. I don't know what's happening. Give me a second. Okay. So the third misconception that people have is that only the big organizations win grants. The reason why it feels like that is, they have the structure, they have the track record. They probably secured 50,000, 100,000, 1 million in grants in the past. They've had successful projects that they've implemented and donors who have said, okay, these guys use the money for what they said they would. They probably have a team of grant writers. There's one time a non-profit in Nigeria was trending because they say they do 100 applications in a year, and everybody was like, how? I mean, these people have the money to pay writers to be on their team. But what about your small, startup or your small SME that you're just trying to do the applications? How do you stand a chance in such an environment? Well, you can actually. because there are specifically grants that target people in your stage, very early stage, but it's also possible for you to compete as long as you understand how well you can align and as long as you're able to clearly articulate your ideas in your application, right? So you still have a shot, right? And don't feel discouraged that, okay, the big guys are getting the money and everything. There's still some people that, last year we had a startup we were working with that she was in the idea stage. She was just hiring her engineers. She had not built out her MVP, but she got into 4 programs, right? And that was she was able to launch her MVP in shorter timeline than she originally planned because of those programs. So there is a shot for you guys. The main one that people say is I'll just apply for one grant and then if I don't, hopefully I make it. If I don't make it, I'll just give up. Right? So grants is a numbers game. The more applications you put in, the more chances of success, right? And that's one of the things we try to encourage people that use our app, right? You should understand that you have to put in more applications because even as you put in more applications, you learn, right? From the feedback you get, you learn, you improve, and you grow. And lastly, it's all about who you know. One of the reasons why we had a slide just for relationship building. Relationships help, right? But as I said in the beginning, ensuring that you align with the criteria and also ensuring that you write properly are the main things that help you stand a chance and help you qualify, right? But relationships will always help, right? Because we are people driven. Humans are driven by relationships, by people you can connect to, people you can see, and those always help you to get through the door. So for the grant life cycle that I did mention, and the first is define. So these are 6 things that you need to really understand when you're approaching your grants. You need to understand that you are in a cycle, and every stage you are in one of these, right? You fall into one of these buckets, right? So I'm going to run through this, and this will form the basis of our conversations today. And if you have any questions in any of these buckets, then you can always ask that towards the end of the presentation. So the first is define, right? And there's research, there's readiness, there's apply, there's award, there's reports, right? And these are intentionally placed side by side because it has to go through from the beginning all the way to the end. It doesn't go from, you don't pick it from any other place. You have to really understand that you are going through this cycle from define all the way to reports, right? And if you skip the cycle, there could be a challenge, there could be a detriment to you on your journey. So the first thing, which is the most fundamental, is define. Are you ready to seek grants, and do you know what you're solving? So define is really about understanding your venture, right? Understanding the impact of your venture. And knowing that grants are impact driven. Some grants are innovation driven, right? When they ask you things around traction, around the idea, how competitive is your idea, how novel is your idea, right? There are some grants that, target novelty in how you're building your solution, especially grants that are for pilots. They want to see a new way of doing things, a fresh way of doing things. Who have you been able to partner with to bring this new innovation into the market? But the overall picture is that it's impact driven, right? They want to know who are you trying to impact? How are you trying to impact them? And what were they doing before your solution, right? So they need to understand the context of the people you're trying to solve the problem for. They need to understand what you're solving. How have you designed your solution to meet these people where they are, right? So you're not just doing blockchain for farmers in a rural community, but you're doing something that is very accessible and actually solves their problem. And what is the resultant output or the resultant impact, not just on the people, but their families, their society, the environment, right? And being able to explain your venture through this lens is only something that can come out if you've been able to sit down and define your idea, right? So the very first thing about defining your idea is problem clarity, right? What specific problem are you solving? For who and how big is it, right? It's not just about, you probably hear the phrase vitamin and painkiller problem, right? It always starts with the problem. What is the specific problem, and who are the people experiencing this problem? How many are these people, right? And how grave is this problem to these people? So that's something you need to ask yourself when you're, thinking around your idea. And know how to measure the impact. It's very, very important and all of these things will factor into your writing when you eventually go to the writing stage. But you need to sit down, open the document and write, okay, what am I measuring in terms of impact for my idea, right? If you're someone that's building a health solution, right? Is it about lives saved? Is it about, am I building a preventive solution that could save, a lot of lives, or people are losing their lives currently, and I'm measuring it based on how many lives am I saving? Or is it something that you're building for founders and you're measuring in terms of time saved, in terms of costs, right? You're building something for the logistics space and you're saving them billions in dollars, or billions in shillings. When what are you measuring based on what problem you're solving? Is it environmental? Are you saving CO2 from being emitted into the environment? Right. So again, you now have to move on to the solution. So you've been able to define your problem. You've been able to quantify what could happen if you solve this problem. Now you want to design the solution to this problem, right? And then you have to ask yourself, is this solution usable, right? Is it viable? And does it meet the people where they are? Does it change the approach to things completely, or does it, slight modification of what they currently do, right? And then after you've done that, you need to understand your niche, right? So in the macro, how do I quantify this thing I'm doing in terms of sectors? Because every grant has a set of sectors that they support, and you need to align yourself to those sectors. Remember I said, one of the things that grants take from you is your story, right? So you need to align your story to different grants they're applying to. Right, so what niche are you in? Right? Are you in health tech, ed tech, clean tech, agri tech, right? And then you need to now say, okay, I have a concept of the solution I'm solving. I have the concept of what I'm doing it for and what the problem is. I know my niche. How big can this get, right? What could happen in 5 years? What can my solution look like in 5 years? And what could be the impact of my solution in 5 years, right? Would I say in 5 years, 100,000 people would get jobs? In 5 years, we would have saved X amounts of CO2 into the environment. In 5 years, we will transition from where we are, our product now, to a whole new product in 5 years. What is that vision? Because again, these are things that you use to explain in your writing. And then finally, what's the proof, right? That's where you hear things like traction. That's where you hear things like able to move the needle from where you are, right? And yeah, you need to explain and articulate your impact. So whether it is, I've got to like partners for my pilots, whether it is people are already using my solution and are giving testimonials, right? What can you convince a funder that, okay, we've actually been able to move from what it is in my head to actual traction, right? And it could be something really little. As I mentioned, the lady that she didn't hire any engineers at the time. She didn't have a product, but she had a community, right? She had people who were excited and who have said, okay, I love this solution that you're proposing, and I want to be a part, and I want to know, when it finally comes to life, I want to be the first person to use it. So she had a community. She had things that she was being vocal on social media. She was going on LinkedIn to, share her journey. She was building partnerships with people, people that align with what she's trying to solve. So all of those things really help, early on, and do not look down on any little win. Someone said, "Oh, I just had only 80 people use my MVP. I don't know, it's not much traction or anything." I'm like, 80 people. You know how easy to get one person to use something, but you've gotten 80 people to use your MVP. That is big proof that, okay, people are actually willing to test this out, even though they've not paid, but they're actually willing to try it out and see, right? So always know that any little thing is very important in your application. So just to support you on your in defining some of the sense shaky, just to support you in defining, I put together like a simple grants readiness checklist. So these are things that you should have some of these, maybe not all of these, but some of these, right? And I will stress on the important ones before you even start looking or researching for grants. The first thing you need is a certificate of incorporation, right? If you're an SME in Nigeria, we have business name, which is a very simpler registration. If you have like co-founders, or if you have people, you need to have a limited liability where everyone is incorporated together. Maybe, I don't know how the jurisdiction is in Ghana, but you need to register and say that, okay, this is a legal entity in Ghana. Second thing to have is a pitch deck. It's just a visual representation of your idea, showing the problem, showing who it's for, showing the solution, and showing your traction so far, and a couple other things, right? You need to have, if you have people on your team, you need to have a CV, right? A lot of it will help you to, there's some questions that you could ask you, what motivated you to approach this idea. You should have a bio, you should have a CV, and also for the core people on your team, right? Because that would help you in your application. Something that is quite optional, but if you're already generating revenue, you should have audited financials, right? Or a financial record to show that, okay, you've actually generated revenue, you have these expenses and all of these, right? So it's quite optional if you're an idea stage or if you're just building your MVP, but if you're already generating revenue from actual people, then you need to have your financials in check. Also, another optional is proof of concept or pilot agreement. If you're building something very heavy, resource heavy, or that would require a partner to help validate or gather data from, you need to show, if you have a pilot partner, you need to present an agreement to show that this has actually been formalized. You need a proof of concept if you are, again, building something that's very resource heavy. And then also optional, but baseline data or impact metrics. So as I mentioned earlier, what are you measuring on your solution? What are the baseline data currently available, and that's you're using to validate and to compare your impact on your journey. And then finally, very important, you need a bank account. A lot of people, they eventually get a grant and then they send their personal bank account. That's very unprofessional. You need to have a bank account registered in the company name, right? It just makes things a lot professional for you, and not just grants, but also equity investing. Imagine sending $50,000 to your personal accounts. That's a very big red flag for donors, right? Because of time, I wouldn't really run through the others. But yeah, I've been able to highlight the four and the ones that are quite optional. At some point, I'll be admitting some people. Okay, people are joining. Interesting. So again, if you have any questions, please, there will be a Q&A for questions. So just write it down and you can ask afterwards. So one thing I also wanted to share is unfair advantages. And if you fall into this bucket, then you're at luck, because in every grant call for application, most of them usually have like preferences. So they have like little biases or little unfair advantages that they sprinkle around the application for just to encourage this set of people to apply, right? And there are a lot of them, right? But I was just able to highlight a few. But there are a lot of them for people, right? So the first is female founder. That's the biggest one. So if you're a woman building a solution in certain markets, as I mentioned, the previous person that got into 4 program, she was a female founder, right? Because these donors have seen that, unfortunately, no, unfortunately, but sadly, a lot of men have been into future programs and they're trying to create the enabling environments to encourage more women to come into business or come into the nonprofit space. So there are a lot of opportunities that sometimes solely for women, but also sometimes they are looking out for women. Sometimes they have an award just for female founders, right? The second is under 35. Usually the sweet spot is around 18 to 25, but also generally under 35. So if generally youth, so just opportunities targeted at the youth population. Some of them are strictly youth. Some of them have preferences for youth. In the global space, there are a lot of opportunities for African founders, a lot of opportunities for African founders. Some are specifically for African founders, some are global, but some preferences for African founders to apply. And then the rest underneath are sector specific. So there are some sectors that we see that, reoccurringly we see the most applications. That doesn't mean that other sectors there are not grants for, but in terms of the volume, right, is where we see certain grants skewed towards. So we see the core essential industries like health, education, logistics, agriculture. We also see some, upsides in clean tech and climate. So clean tech solutions, like a couple of them. We also see waste management and wash sectors. We see AI these days getting a lot of opportunities. But yeah, generally, and we energy as well, a lot of, and then as I mentioned, something that isn't here is we see some SME specific opportunities, right? So people that are doing real businesses, hiring people in those sectors. Of course, there are a lot of other, if you go to the international areas, you see like minority grants, a lot of other preferences and unfair advantages that we have in the grant sector. But again, these are, people sometimes giving their personal money, so they're really looking to support the ecosystem, and that's why we see some of these unfair advantages spring up. So that doesn't mean if you're a guy, you shouldn't apply. If you're a man, you should apply for opportunities as well. But also if you're a woman, know that there are opportunities specifically for you. So the next thing is research, and I'll try to move quicker because time. So research is about hunting smart, not just hard. So, it's always good to work smarter and not harder. So I just put together so you understand that there are different ways to find grants, right? Grants scattered everywhere. And I think the idea that it's scattered everywhere is a problem, right? So you could find grants on official government sites, grants.gov. You have the government of Ghana. I'm sure they have their own specific portals for grants. You have embassy websites. That's something I recently discovered a few months ago, that every embassy, so embassy of Switzerland or embassy of Netherlands to Ghana or Nigeria, there are specific opportunities that are hidden in those websites, right? So there's also bilateral and development agencies like the GIZ, AFD, USAID, a lot of these opportunities from these agencies. We have grant aggregators like Opportunity Dex, MSME Africa, Funds for NGO. So a lot of people share opportunities on LinkedIn if you're there, also Twitter and WhatsApp, so from WhatsApp groups as well. But as I mentioned, the fact that all of these are scattered everywhere is also a problem, because you're going there, you're trying to find grants here, you're trying to track this, track that, track this, track that. So it can be overwhelming in carrying out research, and that's really one of the reasons why Applai exists, and that's something I'll be sharing eventually, right? So again, these slides will be shared so you can also see. But after you've done your research, after you've gone through all these portals, you've gone through this place, you've gathered all the grants in one place, the next thing you need to do is to filter and know which one is actually for me, right? And the mistake a lot of founders make here is they just look at the, okay, this is for my sector, okay, this is for my location, and boom, one start applying. But that's not the case, right? There's a lot of little things that can stop you or can can get you rejected from that particular grant. Right, that's some of the things I want to share on this slide. Right, so I just put together like 10 things that you really should sit down and assess every single grant. So let's say you've gotten 50 opportunities or 10 opportunities. What are those 10 core things that you need to look at to even get an initial scheme and say, okay, is this grant even for me? The first is the sector, right? The grant says, okay, we're supporting edtech and health tech, but you are in fintech. I'm like, it doesn't check out, so you don't need to apply. The second thing is a stage, right? Sometimes the funders may not specifically say the stage, but you can already know from the amount, right? And that's something I'm going to share still. But if they say we're giving $1 million, you should really say, okay, would they give $1 million to something in the idea stage? Sometimes, yes, if it's a very big resource-heavy concept that they're bringing to life. But not all the time. 90% is not the case, right? They're giving $1 million to people who have the track record, they already have the traction, they've been in the operations for so many years, they've already gotten other grants to validate, they can handle such a volume of amounts. So sometimes they also specify. So you need to understand what stage is this grant for. Is it for the idea? Is it for the MVP? Or is it for growth solutions? And then quantify yourself in that bucket. The third thing is the funder profile, right? So the founder profile. So as I mentioned, what I shared in the previous slides about unfair advantages. So what age, what gender, nationality requirements, maybe a specific region in Ghana that they're looking to support, right? So you need to ensure that you fall into that bucket. So company age, right? So most grants specifically say we're only supporting organizations that have been running for the past 3 to 5 years or more than 5 years, or we support 0 to 18 months, right? So they specify the age at which you've been running, and if you go below or above that, then you would be screened out. Then one thing that I put here, but people don't normally do, but I always do, is look at the past grantees. Look at people they've funded in the past, right? If you check, right, maybe they say, we're sector agnostic. We don't look at sectors, we support anyone in any sector. Go and check the last 3 years of people they've supported. If you see fintech, you just know that these people are not sector agnostic, right? They're looking at fintech, they're looking at other flashy sectors, right? But if you see a good mix, then you know, okay, these people are actually looking towards a different thing than just the sector you're in. So it's always important to look at the past grantees, because that gives you a snapshot of who these people are going to fund in this next cycle. The sixth thing is the geography. So I think that's very self-explanatory. Where are the funding? The organization type. So is it for-profit or non-profit or social enterprise? Usually for-profit and social enterprises fall in the same bucket, and non-profits usually fall in separate buckets. Another thing to also add there is, did they specify that you should have been registered, right? So if they specify that we need companies that have been registered and you're not registered, you have to register before you even apply. Some of them specify matching funds, and matching funds means if you're asking for 50K, do you already have 50K, or do you already have someone that can give you 50K to match? If you're asking for 10K, you already have someone that you're co-funding this with them, right? So they are more like helping you bridge the gap that you're looking to raise. The next is deadline, right? And it's quite tricky because I've had grants that I applied the moment it was open and I didn't get in. And then I have those, for instance, the grants that brought me, because the grants brought me to Switzerland, I applied on the last day, the night of the deadline. I applied and I got in. So it's a very tricky situation, but generally you want to be 3 days to be safe, because for me, I can see a grant, I'm a grant writer, I already know what I need to apply for this grant. If I see the grant is closing 11:59 p.m., I can start it by 9 p.m. and I'll submit it by 10 p.m. Again, no matter the length of it, because I know what to do. But in your case, you might need to gather some documents, you might need to even go through the mental stress of attempting to apply for this grant. So you need at least 3 days. Preferably, apply very early, like a week or two before the deadline. All right. So the grant amount as well is something I mentioned. If they're asking for bigger amounts, you know that they're asking for bigger capacity. So be honest to yourself. Am I, some people, they're selling ideas to me and they say, oh, we want to raise $100,000. I mean, fine, there's a particular fund I know that supports edtech solutions with 100K. And, they're not really stressing on the stage you are. Maybe a little traction and you might get in. But be honest with yourself, right? Do you really need 100K to move from point A to point B? Or do you need 100K to move from idea to MVP? Right? Maybe 15K, 20K, 50K. That would also be helpful. So don't be greedy. And yeah, I hope that's, helps. The next thing I want to share is relationship building. And grants are driven by people, not just paperwork. And what do I mean by this? So something I want to share and different ways to, sometimes you're going through. One of the things that we've done on our app is we have if a database of donors, right? So you can immediately see people who have funded solutions similar to yours. You can see their LinkedIn. You can go out and connect with them. Try to build that relationship. But what is let's say you're reaching out to them on LinkedIn, or let's say you just find them at an event and you want to reach out to them. Like, what are the things that you need to say, right? So the first thing, which is not here, is you need to research on the donor, right? All the things I've mentioned in the previous slides, you need to understand what their focus is, what they invest in, what their interests are, and then you now know how to tailor your conversation to them. Right. Usually for me on LinkedIn, if I'm reaching out to a donor, I like to find areas of interest amongst two of us, right? So a simple message that says that highlights, your solution and the area. So if it's based on the beneficiaries of their grant, let's say they have a fund that supports, young people or farmers in Ghana, right? And your idea falls within that category. It's always good to highlight this is a point of reference that you're coming from. You're seeing that these guys are really, supporting solutions in Ghana. Is there a particular grantee that they funded like that in the past? Always good to highlight that, and then present your idea and how different it is, right? And sometimes maybe you find them at events and you want to really know how to. It's always good. For instance, I've been in a lot of events and I always have like a short one-liner that explains my idea that is very simple, because I'm going to be meeting so many people and I have to be able to, get them to understand what I'm doing, right? Usually it's a very simple one-liner that's highlights the benefits of my idea. But when I talk about elevator pitch, which I wanted to also highlight, which may be beneficial to some people, there's a framework I saw online that was really helpful. And it's called the SNAP framework, right? It's really about highlighting, the first thing is the S, which is the story. And it's just about saying, okay, in Ghana, 80% of the farmers, 80% of the crops or harvests by farmers in Ghana are being lost before they get to markets, right? That is a big problem, and that is a story that you've been able to pass, because now the person listening to you kind of understands, the pain from the point of the farmers, because, they're losing all their harvest before it even gets into market. So then you want to highlight the need, right? Why do they need this solution, right? So 80% of crops, of harvested crops, die before they get to the market. And we've been able to design XYZ solution that really helps them save XYZ of whatever is being lost. And the A is the answer, right? So that is really where you highlight, from the point of view of the farmers, what is the maybe you've been able to test the idea, maybe you've been able to, validate the idea with the farmers, and this is where you now highlight, what is the things you've measured that has really helped the farmers, solve this problem. And then finally, you want to highlight the proof, which is the P. So any traction that I'm really highlighting, this is the traction that we've had so far. So I think someone is joining again. So 3 questions that somehow this slide is cutting, but let me see if I can. Yes. So also good to ask the funders in the question, because let's say they don't have an open call, but you believe they'll have an open call. One of the things to also ask them is, what is your next focus for, what is the focus for your next cycle? Like, what are you looking to support in your next cycle? So if you even need to have a conversation with them, if it's even important to do that, right? And then just some things I put in color here about don't burn bridges, don't be a stranger, right? So maybe they've rejected you, just stay in touch, right? One of the things that I do with, but I wouldn't say you should do that with donors unless they agree to it. But I have an investor list for Applai, and people I share like quarterly or biannually progress that we've had, right? And just follow up, comment on their post on LinkedIn, just be in the know. Don't spam, but be noticeable, right? Because maybe what I noticed, and one thing that's very important is I've had people connect me to someone, people that I've not spoken with for over a year. But I'm having a conversation and they're having a conversation and someone says, I'm actually looking to invest in, businesses that are, making cakes in Ghana. And I've been trying to find some people, and then maybe you've been able to build a relationship with one of the person that's in the conversation with that person. I'll be like, I think I know someone that bakes cakes in Ghana. I'm trying to check. Let me check my contact. And they're able to connect you and link you up. I've been linked up in that way so many times, and it's because I've been able to keep this relationship going, right? So also another thing is to funders value collaboration, right? It's very important. For instance, now, we've collaborated with the Hyperspace. If we're, having any conversation, we can say that, okay, we have some touch points in the Ghana market, right? Based on our collaboration with these guys. It's always good to build relationships and build collaboration. It could be, don't always look for, okay, how does it benefit me? I've had a lot of conversations and they bluntly told me, okay, what is the benefit of this thing to us, right? I'm like, I'm here to help your founders, right? A lot of accelerators, and I think I'm really, really happy about Hyperspace. A lot of accelerators that we've approached to have free webinars like this, they're like, okay, this is going to benefit my founders, but what benefits is it to us as an accelerator? I'm like, your accelerator is designed to help founders. So why are you, solely focused on what the benefit is for you, right? So build relationships in the ecosystem, and that helps build credibilities. It also helps in your application. Get media. Some people pay for media, but again, if you're doing really good work, certain media houses will want to cover your story. But having good media presence out there also helps build credibility in your application, right? So when you're writing your application, you can highlight certain donors that certain people you've collaborated with, certain media houses that have, shared your story, and that gives you credibility in your application. So finally to the Applai, and that's something, it's the real deal for a lot of people. And you found your grants, you've done your research, you've defined your idea, right? You've along the way you've built relationships, and now you've been able to skim out the grants that for you. Out of the 10, you now have 3 grants or 2 grants or 1 grant that you want to start applying for. The truth is, I've spoken to a couple of funders, right, just to understand how they think and what they factor into their selection process. We've also been working on a pilot with some funders where we're able to help them build solutions to help them, streamline their selection process. And one of these funders said something that was very, that stood out. They said, we had over 1,500 applications, and 70% of these guys were screened out for little things like, grammar errors, eligibility misalignments, or, they were not able to explain their ideas. They were very incoherent, right? Things like, okay, yeah, they don't understand, they're not primarily English speakers, but, being able to articulate your idea. The funder is an English speaker, so you have to be able to articulate your idea in a way that is clear, in a way that is error-free in terms of grammar, and in a way that it clearly aligns with the grants in question. So those who have not been able to do the assignment in terms of saying, is this grant for me, are the ones that actually miss out. So you spend all this time writing, and then you get that rejection letter. But one other thing that we're seeing a lot is the wrong use of AI. And when it became a trend, a lot of people were using AI to apply for grants. Initially, a lot of funders, came up with regulations about AI usage, but recently a lot of people have eased out those regulations. You understand that they should expect a lot of people will use AI, right? And sometimes AI written applications are somewhat better than handwritten applications by a far margin. But there is an irresponsible use of AI, right? And that is using AI without the context of your venture. So just telling AI, write all the answers to this grant or write me a proposal without actually understanding the things about your venture that AI needs to write this application. Or even if you're using regular models, right, even prompting the AI to know that it is a grant writer and it's not just another thing, right? It's something that you need to, factor in. And we've seen a lot of funders screen our applications because me personally, when I worked with the investment house in Lagos, so many applications are screened out because I do not understand what you're writing. It's poorly formatted, it's clearly AI written without any context about your venture, and it's hallucinating, right? So sometimes they even copy the final AI response about, do you want me to edit this in a way that it is funder friendly, and they paste it into the application. So we've seen a lot of things, and these are some of the simple reasons why people are screened out early on in the writing. But how do you do writing that actually wins, right? And that's the core thing that a lot of people I'd like everyone to take home today. And somehow my slide is cutting at the bottom again. But the first thing I do, and these are my little secrets that I always do when I want to start an application, is I go through the grants website or the RFP multiple times. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to find, keywords that the funder has used more than once. Right? So you could see things like, youth, you should see keywords like sustainability, you could see keywords like job creation, you could see keywords like, CO2 emissions, all of these things, right? They are there for a reason. And they are there because these are things that when their funder is screening, they're looking out for, right? And a little cheat is to ensure that you sprinkle some of these keywords around your application, right? But not in a way like, how people do SEO, where they stuff keywords into SEO so that it ranks, but not that way. But being smart about it when you're, and that has always made a difference in my application. So the second thing you want to do is to study the funder's tone, right? No two grants websites are the same. Some of them, you could clearly see that they are very big on innovation, right? And differentiation. So when you see that they're clear on innovation, you should also know that they're clear on differentiation, right? So you must highlight how different your idea is from the existing solutions like that, right? You see funders that, they specify things like, okay, impact, enabling environment, supporting people, growth, all those, softer words. You don't want to come and start saying, okay, we are the most novel solution out there. We use AI and blockchain. We do this. For those ones, you want to highlight the benefit it is for the beneficiaries. There are some judges that, if you ask, the first thing they highlight is, the first thing they use to score you is, how impactful is your solution on the people that is meant to solve the problem for, the beneficiaries and the customers. So it's very important. You need to understand what is priority to the funder, and that will direct how you approach the application. I can't stress that enough, right? And then also what I mentioned is about researching past grantees, right? You could already know what their biases are and what their preferences are. And now the main thing, right? So answering the questions. And the good news is, for for-profit organizations, the grants are like in a form. Usually most of the grants that you come across are like, a website with an application form, usually a Google link or a type form, with some sort of questions that are always recurring. So if you see here on the bottom, I made like I'm still going to drop it here. There was a particular grant I did a case study on, just to I'm just going to drop it in chat here, and you can just take a look at that. That was 2 years ago. So when I was doing some writing on Medium, this particular grant gives $50,000 to founders, and it was done by one of our partners, ARM, and I just did a deep dive on, sorry, I just did a deep dive on some of the questions that are recurring in the application, so, and how you can approach some of those questions when you're answering. So because of time, I won't really go deep into it, but then some of the most common questions that you see are things like, what problem are you solving? Tell us about your solution, and all of those things. So those are what I covered in that Medium article that you can read afterwards. Use AI, right? Not saying you shouldn't use AI. I mean, it makes things a lot easier for you. It's what we've built an entire product around. But humanize it, right? Give it context. Let it understand that it's a writer, and let it understand your voice. Ensure that you have real data, you have real numbers, and it's not just hallucinating anything for you, right? Share with it your vision and all of those things. Those really help you make a difference. And finally, get a non-expert to read it. It's simple knowledge that if your friend or your coworker or your teammates or even your mom, if she can't understand what you're doing and she can't understand what you wrote, then the funder wouldn't do that. So it's very important that you share it to someone just to help dumb it down and make things more clear. And then something that's also important, but I'll just quickly run through, is the grant budget. So usually for a lot of applications for-profit organizations, you don't have to design a budget, but some grants do ask for budgets, and you need to understand that the budget is only a numerical reflection of what your project and what you want to achieve, right? So you need to understand that if you're saying, okay, we just want to build this solution for schools in my city, but you're asking for $1 million to scale to schools in your city, it's not realistic. So you have to be very realistic, and if that budget is actually what you really need. You should understand what direct costs are, like project costs, indirect costs like overhead. Some funders ask for in-kind, right? Some, like Gates Foundation, I know they always ask for a certain percentage of your grants in-kind. Have someone financially savvy review. Usually it's always advisable, if you're generating revenue, you should have like a financial and legal person that you can call on an ad hoc basis to review. And then understand that your budget is a numerical reflection of your proposal, right? So whatever you're proposing to do, those numbers must tally. If you're hiring 10 people, 10 salaries must be included, or otherwise, if you don't want to, you can omit that. So, and yeah, that's pretty much the bulk of it. I know we have a lot of questions. I think from the questions, we'll go deep and bring more clarity. But as I mentioned, there's something at the end that will be, given to the founders, even to, help you eventually. So I wanted to share a bit more about Apply. And if you notice, we've talked about 6 stages that you go through in your grant. And there's some that, I haven't covered 2 of them. But when we were designing Apply and we factored in these stages, and we knew that a lot of time was spent on certain stages that, it's taking founders away from their business and what they should actually be doing. I mean, more founders are now spending time chasing grants than actually doing business, and not knowing that, success from the business is guaranteed success on the grants, right? So we decided to build Apply from the ground up to help founders who are frustrated about the grant seeking process and looking for a better way to, streamline this process and save them time, but also help them win opportunities, right? And the first thing that we thought of and we thought around is, first, how do we ensure that we have one of the largest database of grants in Africa? And all the sources I mentioned would only give you a fragment of what is out there. But we've been able to, build this from the ground up and ensure that for every sector that we can possibly imagine, there is a grant that we can find. And if there isn't, we will go out and find it for you. So, but it goes beyond, okay, yes, we have a database, and then we can give you all of these. Currently, we have more than 4,000 opportunities. We can give you all of these opportunities to go. But how do we ensure that you're able to find the ones that are for you, but not just finding, but also finding at record time, right? So we've designed Apply to match you to the grants that you should apply for right now in minutes, right? It only takes a few onboarding questions and you can already see the grants that you can apply for. And you can get a match score so you know the ones that you should prioritize. And then we went a step further saying, okay, now we don't only want you to find grants, but you need to build relationships, right? So we also have donor mapping, where not just the grants, but we also have the funders, so you can know who these funders have supported in the past. You can know what amounts are they giving. You already have we provided the LinkedIn contacts that you can go and reach out to these funders easily, and you can start building relationship right away, right? So we don't just provide you grants, but we also provide you funder information, so and you can build that relationship, as I mentioned. And then once you've gotten matched, you probably have like 30 grants that you've been matched to on your database. The next thing you want to do is to apply, right? So we've been able to, and we continue to improve our AI consultants to help you write responses to your application, right? So you can, so I have to admit someone. We have more people joining. Okay. So, and when you're ready to apply, you can then use the AI consultant to, answer those recurring questions that are there. We've built an AI consultant to be smart. We've trained it on, grants that we've used to win more than $1 million in funding. And it would help you not just, apply for these grants, but also explain certain things and explain how eligible you are for this grant. So you have any questions, you can ask AI about a particular grant, and it's always going to give you a good response. But for people that, you have a team, maybe you're a founder and you have someone that is doing your grants for you, maybe a volunteer or someone you just hired as an intern, you can also invite them, right? They can manage the process, they can manage, documents, they can manage the applications, they get like a Kanban board where, you can manage, and you as a founder can supervise and know what they're working on at every point in time, right? So we've not just built a solution for you to find grants in minutes, but you can also apply for those grants using the AI. You can manage your team and you can track deadlines, right? So everything you need to go from, where can I find grants, to I've just submitted my first application and I'm going to do even more, right? So I want to do a quick demo how this works. Hopefully I have time, but I want to do a quick demo of how this works and, just share quickly. And I'm going to use just something in Let me see. Maxwell, do I have some time to do a demo? What do you think?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. All right. So this is our website. And you can go to applygrants.com and do it with me if you want to. But let's get started. Okay, my email, so space now. So password. And put this on. Okay. Okay. So match me to grants, right? So just share a few information about what you're building, an organization, because I'm a founder. I have a startup based in Ghana. Yes. And let's say I am in the technology space. All right, let's see what I have for me. Let's give it a name. So just upper space. So it could be your own organization's name, whatever it is. And yeah, so I've been matched to 26 grants I could start with. What we always advise is that you try to complete your profile, right? So it just gives us more, helps refine the matching, gives you more matching. So if I want to say, okay, I mean, let's add more countries. So let's say I'm in Ghana, but also in Nigeria as well. Right. I'm registered in Ghana, but I'm operating in Nigeria. Let's add a few more sectors and see. Financial services, let's say I'm a fintech. Let's say I'm just bringing it right now. So let's just add extra more sectors and see. I think I need to add more, but yeah, when you add more sectors or more data, it refreshes your matches and you can see more. You can see an updated score and everything, right? So, and yeah, this is something that, if I was doing the research, I would have, been on LinkedIn or been on WhatsApp or something, but I could immediately see what I need. Let's open the grants, right? Let's see this first one. Then I can ask the AI questions or anything, right? So, summarize this grants, right? Let's just summarize this grants. Let's see what it says. Let's see what other. You can see the deadline. You can see the type. You can see what the program does. So we got a summary. I can expand this to a wider screen here, and I can upload a document just to give it more context, and then I can start my application here, right? So if we provided this Kanban board. Let me put something here. If I have my teammates, I can, I have an application here. I can do a comment or whatever you want to do. And after you've started the application or after you've submitted, you can move it all the way to submit, right? So you can also share to your team, invite your team. The good thing is also if you're someone that, I heard some people say, okay, we have multiple businesses, right? So not just doing one thing, but you're doing other businesses. You can create a new workspace, right? So you can add a new workspace. And now you have 3 different environments that you can get matched to grants for your 3 different organizations, right? So as many organizations as you have, you can create a new workspace. You can invite different people to that team. You can start your applications all on the go, right? So that's just a quick scheme of, every time if you need to hire a grant writer, you can always access here and hire someone, right? So yeah, that's just there's still more you can achieve here, but that's just the basics of what you need to go from, research to writing and to management. And that's what we try to offer. Right. So back to our presentation. The last few things I want to highlight is, I think I've highlighted the budget. Oh yeah, I think that's all. Okay. So yeah, that's everything. I think I talked about the budget, but yeah, that's everything. And before I pass the mic Maxwell for Q&A, there's one thing are really important for us. I'm still going to share a link in the chat, but if you can scan the QR code on your screen, it leads you to a feedback form, and you can share any feedback that you've had, anything you've learned from these sessions. Maybe Maxwell, we could just give like a few minutes, and then we can kick off the Q&A. And what do you think, Maxwell?
Yes, I think we can go ahead whilst people are scanning for the feedback form. If you have any question, kindly ask or put it in the chat so that we can give you an answer to your question. So there's one hand up. Doza. I hope I'm pronouncing your name well.
Okay. Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for the opportunity. My name is actually John. It was when I was setting up that the Doza came. So my name is actually John. I'm from Northern Ghana. My question is, I wanted to find out if you are writing your grant proposal. I've been having this difficulty. Sometimes you write and somebody will be like, where have you gotten your source from? So for instance, you're writing something on sanitation or wash, and you say, oh, in Ghana, about 50% lack decent wash facilities or structures in place. And some of the people I've worked with will be like, where is that source coming from? So that I ought to cite it. And sometimes the difficulty I have is like, if I have to cite or every single statement I make or fact that I make and I have to cite it, then it reduces it to an academic exercise. So that is my thinking. So I want to find out from his experience, is it actually mandatory or necessary to cite everything in terms of in-text citation that I'm referring to for you to cite?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. So as long as they specified it, yes, the answer is yes. And there's been cases where we've had to use in-text citations and also references at the end of the proposal. Yeah, it does feels like academic writing, and academic writing is not really exciting to do, but it's very important because I think this particular funder is probably a very large funder, and they need to ensure that whatever case you're making is actually backed by data, by public verifiable data. So it's very good for you to cite it in text, but also have like a reference towards the end to show where the actual sources are from.
Okay, thank you. Lastly, your platform, is it paid? Is it something that you can use free and after which you have to now pay to access your services? You didn't explain that.
Yes, I was going to do so at the end. But I would explain how that works after the questions. But I think someone highlighted something, and thank you. Like the QR code is different. So if you check the chats, I dropped the link to the feedback form. Please confirm you can actually access the form, right? And then I'll share it afterwards. Thank you. Okay, over to you, Maxwell.
Okay, thank you. There's one question in the chat. Okay, there is Paul John. Paul, please go ahead with your question.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity. I think I wrote something in the chat, but I didn't get anything about it. Actually, my network has been bad, so I didn't really enjoy the lecture. So I was asking whether it is possible we getting the recordings for
Yes.
onward listening. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, I did respond to that. But I think you missed it. Yes. Yes. So we will share it after the session. We will send an email to everybody so that you can get the recording. So there's a question in the chat says, how do you submit it in the app? What is asking, how do you submit it in the app?
Yeah, great question. So right now, what the app help you do is to generate the answers to the question. One of the things that we've been working pipeline is integrating to some of the funder sites or allowing you to upload directly on the funder sites, and that's something that in the coming months we should have huge success with. But for now, it helps you generate answers to the grant, and then you go onto the funders portal to apply for it. For most of the grants on the platform, you'd already have the questions already there, right? So you don't need to go and get the questions from the funders portal to get the answers, but you can access it there. But for those that do not have, you can just go to the funders portal, get the questions, paste it, and the AI responds, and then you can have your answers already there. But one of the things I also wanted to highlight based on the what the AI really helps you do is it's already been customized as an experienced grant consultant, right? We've trained it based on winning proposals that we've used, and it also understands the context of the grant. So everything I shared during my presentation about, okay, what is the funder's language, what is their tone, what are their biases, those are some of the things that you understand. And all you need to do when you come in is to bring in your own context about your venture, right? Whether it's a pitch deck, whether it's a previous proposal, an application you've written in the past, whether it's your CV, all of these things, help give it much more context, because a lot of, as I mentioned in the presentation, funders are easing out guidelines in terms of AI usage, but they are stressing on context, right? And that's something that regular conventional models may fail if you don't use it properly.
Okay. There's also one question from Josephine. She's asking that what are some of the basic documents donors usually expect from organizations that apply for grants?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna, I think I highlighted some, but I'll go deeper on it. Okay. Yeah. So, oops. So the first thing, where am I? Okay. So the first thing is you need to be incorporated. It just ensures that, okay, this is a legal entity, right? That is verifiable, that is traceable, and the founder is very serious about what they're building, right? So it's not going to be, I don't know what the jurisdiction is in Ghana, but in Nigeria, we have limited liability incorporation, we have business name incorporation for, small SMEs, right? The next thing, because you're a for-profit organization, and it's common with for-profit donors, they look for a picture, right? So it's a document that highlights, what you are, what problem you're solving, what your solution is, and what have you, right? The next thing that we've seen a lot of donors ask for is financials, right? Especially if you're revenue generating, you should have audited financials, or you should just have that highlights your past financial record, right? How much have you generated? What's your expenses, and so on and so on. And then you should have a bank account, right, in your company's name, not just you have an account, like you're asking for $50,000 to be sent to your personal bank account. It's not professional at all. I think those are the core. Well, generally, you should have a CV. I think everyone has a CV. Some donors ask for that, but I think for someone in early stage, these are realistic things that you can have, right? for your before starting an application, right? Let me see if there's been more that have been asked in applications I've worked on. Yeah, I think these are the key essentials. If you want to go further into much bigger applications, you would see it's a lot. For instance, if we go to let me go to the app and show you a bit more. Let me show you a bit more. If you come here and see complete your profile, we actually have a document readiness section, right? Where we ask you things like, article of association, memorandum of association, taxes, intellectual property, if you have any registered trademarks or registered IP, a budget breakdown. You could have proof of co-funding. You could have bank statements. If you go to project documents, you could have like a monitoring and evaluation plan, logical frameworks, theory of change. You have your board member list. That's also important if you have board members, and the CV of the board members. Reference letters are also key. You need a pitch video. I think for your case, they always ask for a pitch video as well. So it could be a 1 minute pitch video, 6 minutes pitch video, or what have you, right? So it goes from simple to very complex. But I think if we are going to dumb it down for the founders here, which majority of us are in beginner, you need like a certificate of incorporation, you need a pitch deck, you need a pitch video, and you need your bank accounts in the company's name, and then generally a CV of you and your team. So I hope that helps with the question. Josephine.
All right. So any further questions from anyone? You can put your hand up or just go ahead and put it in the chat. And also the link to the forms, the feedback form is also pasted in the chat, so you can also click on it and give us a brief feedback or a takeaway from what you've learned so far. Chuma, any final words for us? Said you wanted to share something. The question somebody asked in terms of payment, or do you have to pay for something, the price, and any other thing that you're going to share?
Yes, thank you. Let me try to pull this up so it doesn't. Okay. So one thing that I want to do is, I still know that some people will have questions, or maybe they have a particular grant that's that has been troubling them, and they have like maybe they just need some extra questions. They just need to just need someone to talk to, right? And from next week we will be having like free office hours with me. So you could come with anything, right? You want to talk about a particular grant. I've been on calls where I spent almost an hour trying to dissect a particular grant application for a random person that messaged me on LinkedIn, right? So for every person on this call, if you have such questions, or if you have, you need clarity on something, we can have a free call. So this takes you to a Calendly link if you scan, and you can book a time next week to just have a chat with me. Not during the weekend because I'm traveling, but any time during the week, during office hours in the week, and I'll be more than happy to be on that call and support you. So if you can, just put in, when you're booking the call, in your name section in parentheses, put hyperspace, right? So I know where you're coming from, and I could approach those sessions with clarity. Or if you have more questions about Applai, there's also something we can discuss as well. And yeah, so for Applai, we have a free trial period where you can use the app. Ideally, try to attempt an application and submit during that trial period, and then afterwards it's paid, and it's 30. It's billed quarterly, so 3 months is 100 USD for the 3 months, and that gives you access to, all the grants within that 3 months, new grants coming up within that 3 months, and more AI usage to use and attempt as many applications. Remember what I said during the pitch, that the more applications you put in, the higher your success is, right? So yeah, you can try it out within this period, try to attempt an application and apply, and just gives you clarity on within that free trial, you already have like, an actual application that you've done and a starting point for the rest of your grant application. And one thing that also that we provide is, for your first application, we would actually have human experts review it, right? So we would review your application, we would provide you feedback, we would improve it for you and send it back to you. And now you can have not just an AI, perfectly AI generated response, but you also have a human vetted application. And that's one of the things that we do to ensure that, all our founders are able to secure grants in their first 3 months of paying, right? So yeah, those are some of the extra value that we provide to founders. And again, the call is free. You can book, and I will look forward to, getting on the call with you next week.